No, sir, I don't got no bodies. Don't put me in that conversation in any type of situation. Don't troll with it. Don't rap about it. Don't even speak on it. As Boosie just got a very light sentence in the feds, and I say beating the feds because they wanted prison time from him, but he was able to walk it down.
Pooh Shiesty just dropped something on Instagram that instantly had the entire hip-hop world buzzing, and Boosie allegedly fired back in a way nobody saw coming. Shiesty posted a photo with the caption, "Only rapper that has more bodies than me is Lil Boosie," and what followed after that, absolutely wild. We're talking federal cases, alleged paid hits, a 15-year-old hitman who couldn't sleep at night, and confessions that landed people behind bars for life. This isn't just rap beef anymore. This is drifting into federal territory, and the streets are watching closely. Stick around, because what Boosie allegedly said in response might shock you. Lil Boosie is a certified legend in hip-hop, no doubt about it. The Baton Rouge rapper built his name on being authentic and representing the streets harder than most. But here's where things get complicated. Boosie's name has long been connected to one of the most disturbing alleged murder for hire stories ever tied to the rap world. We're talking about 15 victims, a teenage assassin known as Marlo Mike, and confessions that shook Louisiana. Now Pooh Shiesty is online trolling, claiming he's got more bodies than Boosie, and the internet is losing its mind. But to understand why that statement is so serious and why it's catching federal attention, we have to rewind and look at what allegedly happened in those 15 murders. Let's go back to the mid-2000s in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. At that time, the streets were on fire, and Boosie was climbing in the rap industry while allegedly being involved in activities that went far beyond music. According to federal investigators and courtroom testimony, Boosie wasn't just rapping about street life, he was allegedly directing parts of it. Enter Marlo Mike, whose real name is Michael Louding. This kid was only 15 years old when he allegedly became Boosie's personal hitman. Yes, 15. A teenager reportedly carrying out murders tied to a rap star. According to court records and Marlo Mike's own confession, Boosie allegedly paid him to eliminate people he had problems with. And we're not talking about 1 or 2 incidents. Investigators say it turned into a pattern that left 15 people dead. The connection between Boosie and Marlo Mike was allegedly built on loyalty, money, and fear. Marlo Mike reportedly looked up to Boosie almost like a mentor, and prosecutors claimed that influence was used to push the teenager deeper into violence. People in the street suspected something was happening, but nobody wanted to talk. That's the code. Speak up and you might become the next target. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. Marlo Mike wasn't some hardened criminal who could detach from the violence. He was still a kid. And after 15 killings, the weight of it started crushing him. According to testimony, he couldn't sleep anymore. The faces of the people he killed haunted him constantly. The guilt kept building until he finally reached a breaking point. So what did he do? Marlo Mike went to the police and confessed everything. Names, dates, locations, every detail investigators wanted. Most importantly, he claimed Boosie was the person who ordered the hits and paid him to carry them out. Let's talk about some of those victims. According to court documents and Marlo Mike's confession, these weren't random acts of violence. Each killing allegedly had a reason: street disputes, accusations of snitching, disrespect, or business conflicts. One of the most well-known cases involved Terry Boyd, who was shot and killed in October 2009. This murder became the centerpiece of Boosie's trial. Prosecutors claimed Boosie paid Marlo Mike $2,800 to kill Boyd after a dispute. Another victim was Marcus Thomas, who prosecutors said was also targeted. Rumors in the streets suggested Thomas had been talking too much, and investigators claimed he was silenced permanently. Chris Jackson was another victim prosecutors described as part of a planned hit. Marlo Mike testified that Boosie allegedly gave him detailed instructions about how the killing should be carried out. The list continued: Daryl Milton, Michael Smith, Kendrick Bishop, each name tied to allegations connected to the same operation. Every victim had family members and people who cared about them, and their lives ended over street conflicts and alleged rap world drama. But that's not even the most chilling part. According to Marlo Mike's testimony, Boosie allegedly didn't just order hits, he also gave instructions about how they should happen. Prosecutors claimed he discussed weapons, timing, and ways to avoid getting caught. Investigators described it as calculated and organized rather than random violence. Marlo Mike told detectives that after each killing, he would receive cash payments, sometimes a few $1,000s, sometimes more depending on the target. For a teenager growing up in the streets, that kind of money seemed huge, but eventually the money couldn't silence his conscience. Court testimony revealed that Marlo Mike started having intense nightmares. He'd wake up drenched in sweat, seeing the faces of the people he'd killed. He struggled to eat, struggled to function. The psychological toll of being a teenage killer was tearing him apart. By the time he went to the police, he was ready to reveal everything. He gave detailed confessions about the murders, offered evidence, and agreed to testify against Boosie in court. The streets labeled him a snitch, but Marlo Mike said he simply couldn't live with the guilt anymore. The trial of Lil Boosie quickly became one of the most closely watched legal battles in hip-hop history. In May 2012, Boosie stood trial for the first-degree murder of Terry Boyd. The prosecution's star witness was Marlo Mike himself. On the stand, he delivered chilling testimony about how the Boyd killing allegedly happened. He described following Boyd, waiting for the right moment, and shooting him multiple times. He also testified that after the murder, he was paid $2,800 and told he had done a good job. The courtroom reportedly fell silent as the young man, now in his early 20s, described his life as a teenage assassin. Boosie's defense team argued that Marlo Mike was lying in hopes of getting a lighter sentence. They portrayed him as an unreliable witness who was making accusations to save himself. Boosie maintained his innocence throughout the trial, saying he had nothing to do with any killings. Prosecutors, however, said they had more than just testimony. They presented phone records showing communication between Boosie and Marlo Mike around the time of the murders, financial evidence of cash transfers, and witnesses who claimed to have overheard incriminating conversations. After hours of deliberation, the jury reached a decision. The entire hip-hop community was watching closely to see whether one of rap's biggest names would be convicted. In the end, the jury found Boosie not guilty of first-degree murder in the Terry Boyd case. The streets erupted with celebration as Boosie walked out of the courtroom a free man on that charge. But the story didn't end there. Marlo Mike wasn't so fortunate. He was convicted of multiple murders and sentenced to life in prison without parole. At only 22 years old, he would spend the rest of his life behind bars for crimes he committed as a teenager. For the families of the other victims, the outcome felt incomplete. Although Marlo Mike confessed to 15 killings, the legal system could not prosecute every case, leaving some families without full closure. Investigators said the case revealed a dark side of Baton Rouge's rap scene, where street violence and the music industry sometimes overlapped. Authorities began digging deeper into similar connections, looking at whether young gang members were being used to carry out hits in exchange for money and influence. In court, several witnesses described a culture of fear surrounding Boosie's circle. Prosecutors tried to portray it as a criminal enterprise hiding behind a rap label, but reactions in the streets were divided. Some people believed Boosie had been unfairly targeted by a system trying to take down a successful rapper. Others believed the allegations showed someone exploiting young kids and turning them into killers. The debate spread through barbershops, social media, and hip-hop forums everywhere. Boosie's family stood firmly by his side. His mother, his children, and loyal supporters insisted he was innocent and being targeted because of his fame. They also argued that prosecutors tried to use his rap lyrics against him in court. By the time Boosie was released from prison in 2014, after serving time on unrelated drug charges, the streets had changed. The case had brought national attention to Baton Rouge's violence problem, and law enforcement had started cracking down harder than ever. Meanwhile, Marlo Mike remains in Angola State Penitentiary, one of America's most notorious prisons. In interviews from behind bars, he has expressed regret, but the damage is permanent. 15 families lost loved ones, and a young man threw away his entire future before he was even old enough to vote. Now fast forward to 2024, and here comes Pooh Shiesty with that Instagram post. He uploads a picture and writes something along the lines of, "Only rapper that has more bodies than me is Lil Boosie." Immediately the streets start talking. Is it a diss? Is he trolling? Or is Pooh Shiesty actually claiming something serious? Here's the thing about Pooh Shiesty. People say the man moves reckless. Almost every case tied to his name involves gunfire. Let's take a quick look at his legal history, because it's honestly wild. I want to speak on something right quick. I ain't siding with Glowreel. I ain't siding with bro, but I do want to say first up is the King of Diamonds incident in Miami on May the 30th, 2020. Pooh Shiesty allegedly shot a security guard during an altercation at the famous
strip club. Witnesses and surveillance footage reportedly showed an argument breaking out before Shiesty pulled a weapon and started firing. The guard was hit and injured. According to reports, it wasn't an accident, it was deliberate gunfire inside a crowded club. The case suggested that when situations get heated, Shiesty's first reaction might be to reach for a gun. Then there's the Bay Harbor Islands shooting and robbery case, which is what really caught federal attention. On October 9, 2020, prosecutors say Pooh Shiesty and his associates arranged a meeting with two men to purchase marijuana and expensive sneakers. But instead of completing the deal, investigators say the group robbed the victims at gunpoint. During the robbery, shots were fired and one of the victims was struck in the hip. Surveillance cameras reportedly captured the entire situation, giving federal agents clear evidence tying Shiesty to the incident. What made the case even more shocking is that prosecutors said one victim was shot in the buttocks and left bleeding in the street, while the suspects drove away with marijuana and sneakers. Imagine getting shot over weed and shoes. The victim had to be hospitalized and required surgery. Federal prosecutors charged Pooh Shiesty with conspiracy to possess firearms in furtherance of violent and drug trafficking crimes, along with discharging a firearm during a crime of violence. These are heavy federal charges that come with mandatory prison time, and when the feds step in, it usually means they already have a strong case built. In January 2022, Pooh Shiesty eventually pleaded guilty to a single firearms conspiracy charge as part of a plea agreement. He was sentenced to 63 months in prison. That's more than 5 years. In federal prison. Right now, he's locked up, and at the earliest, he won't be getting out until 2026. And even when he does walk free, he'll still be under supervised release, which means one wrong move could land him right back behind bars. But here's the part that really raises eyebrows. Pooh Shiesty's track record shows a pattern of reacting first and thinking later. The King of Diamonds shooting and the Bay Harbor Islands robbery shooting both paint the picture of someone who's not exactly shy about pulling the trigger. So when he jumps on Instagram claiming he's got bodies, it doesn't sound completely unbelievable. Some people even think he might be telling the truth. And we can't ignore the music either. In his track First Day Out, FDO, Pooh Shiesty literally raps about sending hits and paying others to deal with his problems. At one point, he says, "I don't even gotta be there, I just send the addy in the back end." That line basically describes ordering a hit in plain language. He's talking about dropping an address and sending payment so someone else handles the situation. That's strikingly similar to what Boosie was once accused of doing with Marlo Mike. And make no mistake, federal investigators pay attention to lyrics, especially when they seem to line up with real-world crimes. Shiesty is already serving federal time on gun charges. If he's out here rapping about arranging hits and then posting online about having bodies, he could be handing prosecutors extra material to work with in future cases. So when Pooh Shiesty throws shade at Boosie, claiming he's got more bodies, there are two possibilities. Either he's being serious, or he's trolling in a way that could bring serious legal consequences. Either way, the post definitely got people talking, including, allegedly, Boosie himself. According to sources close to the situation, Boosie heard about the post and wasn't thrilled. Word floating around says he responded privately with something along the lines of young rappers not understanding what they're playing with, saying they're risking their freedom just to rack up Instagram likes. Now, we can't verify the exact wording, but people around Boosie claim he's not brushing the diss off. At the same time, he's not about to jump online and start arguing about body counts either. And honestly, that makes sense. Boosie knows firsthand how dangerous those conversations can be. He spent years fighting murder charges and only narrowly avoided a life sentence. The last thing he's going to do now is give federal investigators any reason to circle back around by engaging in a social media feud. This whole situation points to a bigger issue inside hip-hop culture. You've got younger rappers trying to outdo each other over who's tougher, who's more dangerous, and who supposedly has the most bodies. But the consequences are very real. People are losing their lives, others are ending up behind bars forever, and entire futures are getting destroyed over lyrics and online posts. Pooh Shiesty is just 22 years old and already facing serious federal time. Marlo Mike is serving life for murders he committed as a teenager. Boosie beat his case, but he still spent years fighting it and carrying the weight of those accusations. These aren't characters in a video game. These are real lives permanently shaped by violence. The fact that Pooh Shiesty would publicly claim to have bodies while already dealing with federal charges shows just how disconnected some young artists might be from the reality of their situation. The feds are watching everything. They're reading captions, studying posts, and listening closely to every lyric. When someone brags about murders in public, it can easily become evidence later. And there's another side people often forget: the victims. In Boosie's case alone, 15 lives were lost according to testimony tied to Marlo Mike. When it comes to incidents connected to Pooh Shiesty, there have also been people hurt or killed. These aren't just statistics or punchlines in rap songs. These were human beings with families who loved them. The hip-hop world really needs to have a deeper conversation about this culture of violence. Authenticity matters in rap, and telling your story is part of the art. But there's a big difference between describing what you've been through and actively participating in violence or bragging about it for attention. Boosie has admitted in interviews that he regrets many things from his past. He's spoken openly about how the street life nearly destroyed him and how he's trying to be a better role model for his kids. Whether people believe that or not, at least he acknowledges that the lifestyle carries serious consequences. Pooh Shiesty, meanwhile, is still right in the middle of that world. He's young, impulsive, and taking risks that could cost him everything. Dissing Boosie over body counts might bring attention online, but it could also lead to more federal charges, longer prison time, or something even worse. So where does that leave things? Pooh Shiesty made a bold Instagram claim that many interpreted as a diss toward Boosie, saying he's got more bodies. Boosie, who prosecutors once linked to 15 killings carried out by Marlo Mike, reportedly responded by warning younger artists about risking their freedom. At the end of the day, this whole situation is a reminder that rap beef isn't always entertainment. When people are actually dying, it stops being a game. When teenagers are turned into killers, it's not just music anymore. And when someone ends up spending life in prison or losing their life entirely, the clout suddenly doesn't look worth it. Marlo Mike confessed to 15 murders because the guilt eventually became too heavy to carry. Now he's serving life in prison, while the families of those victims are still living with the loss. Pooh Shiesty is just already sitting in federal prison facing years behind bars, yet he's still making posts that could potentially add more time to his sentence. The streets are definitely paying attention to what happens next. Will Pooh Shiesty face consequences for that post? Could federal investigators try to use it in the future? And will Boosie eventually address the situation more directly? Only time will reveal how this plays out. But one thing is certain: when you play federal games, you end up winning federal prizes. And both Boosie and Pooh Shiesty understand that better than most. That's the real story behind Pooh Shiesty dissing Boosie. It's getting federal, it's getting dangerous, and it's a reminder that this rap world is about more than just music. Stay safe out there, and remember, clout is never worth losing your freedom.